Today's guest is a nationally renowned artist specializing in painting athletes and celebrities. He was selected as the official commemorative artist for Major League Baseball's 2007, 2008, and 2009 All-Star Games, as well as the official artist for the 2007 World Series. He was also commissioned by the National Hockey League to produce original artwork for the 2010, 2011 Bridgestone NHL Winter Classics, and the list goes on and on. Please welcome to Inside Arthead, the artist, Brian Fox. Greetings, everyone, and thanks for joining the Inside Arthead podcast. It's here we'll explore the inspiration, motivation, process, and fulfillment of creating art. I'm your host, Roni Zulu, bringing you inspirational stories from artists around the world. Well, Brian, thanks for being on the show and allowing us to get inside your art head.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me.
Heck yeah. I'd like to start by letting our listeners and viewers get a little background on us. I had the pleasure of meeting you, what was it, somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago?
Yeah. Had to be about that far. Yeah.
Yeah. And you stopped by my shop and just to say hi. And I wanted to ask, is that something you do a lot with other artists and people that you want to meet? You just pop in just to get their vibe? I mean, what was going on with that? I mean, this amazing artist walks into my shop and says, hey, I just wanted to talk to you. And you didn't come there for a tattoo.
No, I don't have any tattoos. I just came in. I remember, I don't know if it was years ago on Facebook. I might have connected with you but I hadn't met you in person. And I live on the East Coast and you were West Coast. And my brother lives in LA, and I thought, maybe if I'm ever out there, I'm going to look you up and just stop in, bring you guys some coffee and just stop in. And, I think that's what it was. It was just like, I like to just reach out to people. And as artists, I think we sit in our studio by ourselves for so long that I like to grow my own little community of like-minded people, or whether they're, artists or musicians or writers or anybody on the art side, or just people who are kind, so you kind of fit all those. And I was like, I got to meet this guy.
Well, I'm glad you did, because our viewers wouldn't know unless I told them. You were such a heavy influence on me. I used to see your paint. You were, because I looked at your paintings online before I started painting, and I was really scared too. And you probably remember, I sent you a picture of my very, very first painting, and you critiqued it for me, and it helped me so much. So if any of you out there like my paintings, you have this guy to thank. He's the one that told me that, hey, man, you can do this. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, listen, I appreciate it. I'm glad that you reached out and entrusted me. And again, it was just more of like an encouragement. Like, life's too short not to encourage somebody else to do something they're willing to try to do. So I think that's all it was.
Awesome. Now, Brian, do you come from an artistic family, or are you some kind of artistic anomaly?
Well, no, I think I have. If I look back into like my grandfather's brother, so my granduncle, you guess, he was an artist. My dad is a musician, so I mean, I have that side of things. So I mean, I know there's the art side, even though I think I'm the first one to really ever go to college in my family. I went to art school and kind of pursue it as a profession.
Awesome. Now, as a small boy, I'm assuming, like most of us, we were always drawing on things, most things we probably shouldn't be drawing on, and drawing when we're supposed to be paying attention to the teacher. I'm sure you were one of those.
Absolutely.
Now, tell me, the sports are very influential in your art. I've noticed sports, musicians, and some religious motifs, but I'm going to jump into the sport thing.
Sure.
Were you an athlete, and did that have something to do with you painting so many sports figures?
Yeah, it does. It's kind of a hybrid answer, because as a kid, I was always out running around playing football. I didn't play a lot of organized sports. I mean, I played organized basketball, baseball, and little league, and all through those when I was a kid. So I loved to play, and I was always out in the street playing with all my friends. And any sport, we'd just pick up a ball and play. But it was also a choice when I quit my full-time job, literal leap of faith. I quit. I'm going to start working in the commercial field. I was working as a commercial artist. I quit. And then I think I'm going to go working in the commercial industry, but it didn't work out that way where my ex-boss was kind of upset that I didn't, that I left. And he kind of let it be known that I signed a non-compete, which was untrue. And most people were just like, hey, we can't hire you now. And I said, well, that's not really true. And so I was left with absolutely nothing. And at that stage of my life, I had one child, one on the way. I was married, mortgage, car payments. And now I'm thinking, I thought I was going to have a lot of freelance work, but now I have nothing. Ooh. And I started to think, well, what could I work on? What could I do? What could I try to do to make money? And I like sports. And I figured if I started painting, around here in the Boston area, everybody's ravenous of sports. So I have a built-in audience. So it was I loved it, but I also figured if I painted those sports figures, I had a base audience that would be interested in potentially buying some of it. So that's kind of a long answer for why I got into and went toward the sports. And I rode the wave of success of the teams. At that time, it was 2004, where the Red Sox had finally won the World Series after, 86, 7 years, and people were ravenous. And I kind of painted a moment in time back then and got swept up in all the media. And it took years to really catch on afterwards. But it was during those times that the teams were doing very well. The Patriots were doing very well, and the Celtics. And so when I'm painting something everybody wants, that helped my career as well.
That's pretty darn smart. And I think it's awesome that also is genuine with you, because you had such a passion for sports. So it wasn't you were latching onto something because that's going to make me money. It just happened to be both. So it seems that worked out pretty nice for you. And with that, I think a lot of people, particularly artists, would assume that if they paint celebrities, or let's just say famous people, it will in proxy make them famous. But I've known it not to be true. I know a lot of people who have painted celebrities and nobody knows who they are, and the work didn't take off. What do you think? What kind of magic happens in your work that that people are drawn to it? I mean, I can go out and buy a painting of Muhammad Ali by 50 million different artists, but you've been recognized as someone that somehow actually captures the essence of these people, and it's not just a picture of a photo. It's more than that. How does that happen?
That's a good question. I don't know. I can only say I was born with a gift to paint, and there are so many more talented people than me that paint these guys. I don't know. I just know that I like to paint them. I want to try to capture who they are on the canvas, and sometimes it doesn't work out, and I just paint over them, or I'll have actually blowtorched paintings that I hate. They just don't feel like what you've just described. But at the same time, I think too that I got to meet a lot of these guys in person, and Boston being such a tight community where, for example, you're painting the Red Sox and the Patriots, right? But Mark Wahlberg is a Patriots and a Red Sox fan. Mm-hmm. So, he's in Hollywood. So there's crossover there. So you get invited to some of Mark's movie premieres, and then the Patriots are there, and then they know you, and you're in this kind of very close circle, a trusted circle, and then everybody seems to get to know me there, and that kind of says a lot. And then you get work that way. So somebody says, "Hey, I want you to do a painting for me," and it's all word of mouth. And so I don't know if those relationships have helped with the paintings themselves, mm-hmm. or just continue to grow the career. I'm not really sure, and I'm always winging it. There's no formula that I don't advertise. I don't, and it's taken a long time to get to this point, but that's kind of what happens.
I like that long time.
It's long.
It's a long one. If a young artist sees your work and is like, man, I want to be like this guy, or at least emulate them, what advice would you have if they said, Brian, tell me something, anything? I'm a new artist. I just got some oil paints. I'm just getting into art school, and it's a big, brave world. Can you give me just a little slice of knowledge, advice, something?
Yeah, yeah. One would be, if you're born with this talent, you're not born with it by mistake.
Mm.
I believe we're all born with talents, and I believe, God doesn't make mistakes. He gives you these abilities. So that's one thing. So, and I say that because a lot of times in where I grew up, New England versus, let's say, California, New England's a very blue collar, get a real job, especially when I was younger, get a real job, you're not going to make a living doing music or art or acting or whatever, or writing. That's more of, hey, we don't even understand what that is. So I try to encourage people to go, no, you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. Years ago, I used to live in a shed and traded my drawings for food.
Oh,
So,
wow.
it's kind of, but I would also encourage them to go, you got to practice. You got to be humble enough to listen to other people who know better than you. I can't tell you, I still have artists come in and go, that's wrong. You got to fix this. That's a little off. And if you don't listen to that, you can't get any better. And two, everybody sees me. I'm the face of my business because I'm the one artist, but nobody sees all the people behind me who help me. And that comes down to, if you're married, my wife is a big encouragement, and you've got good people around you who are behind the scenes who nobody sees. Somebody introduces you, friends introduce you to other people, or you have good people behind you who can, do your books or do your accounting. Nobody sees those people, but you don't get anywhere without good people around you. And I would say, as other artists, it's like, you got to really work at it, and you got to understand that those things exist as well. And it really is how you treat people.
That's awesome. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Likewise with me, people have to know how much help I've had, and without those people, I wouldn't be where I was. Can you give us a specific? There are certain teachers in my life when people were to ask me, who's that one person or those couple of people that really either helped you believe in yourself or pushed you forward, or when you look back, you say that was a very crucial person in my life. Looking back, who would that be?
There's a lot, and it goes back to, and I go back to when we were all kids. You even said at the beginning where we can identify with, every kid liked to draw, but if you don't have parents or adults who encourage that, it gets cut off right away. So I would start there. My parents were always encouraging. Were always, hey, you're going to go to school for this, even though they had no idea what that meant. They were like, yeah, you have this ability. So that was very helpful. And in college, I had two professors who were fantastic draftsmen, and they taught me how to draw the figure. And I just loved those two guys for that. And then as you get out of college, you start to these peers that you latch onto. You start to go, how did you do that? And you ask these guys all these different questions. And there's a guy who lives a couple of houses over from me, and he doesn't paint realistically, but his knowledge of art is incredible. And I still have him come over and go, something's wrong. How do I fix this? And but those guys are still in my life, where you just have to be able to, you got to get better, right? I mean, you want to always know. You don't want to know. You don't want to hear it, but you need to hear it to get better. You're like, oh, I screwed up again. So, and I constantly look for those people to have on my team, so to speak, where they're kind of like people. I go, all right, I need you. I pick up the phone. Let me send you something. Let me, show you this. Is there, something's off here. How do I fix this? What's wrong with this? So that's just with the paintings, stuff like that.
Now, you mentioned that your friend doesn't paint like you. Maybe he's abstract or maybe he's different. Do you find that it's valuable for artists to expose themselves to art that is not like what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. Because he comes from a point of view that he understands exactly what I do. So that's valuable. He understands what I'm trying to do. He doesn't try to change it. But he comes with a whole different mindset that I don't normally think that way. So he brings tremendous value to the table. And you could some of the stuff in my work where you see, let's just say the compositions or the color choices is directly from this guy's teaching of me. And it's just more conversations we have. Not even like I'm not taking a class with him, but it's this conversations over years I've had with this guy. So I call him my secret weapon.
That's awesome. That's a good one to have.
Yeah. But I would say, abstract artists, I mean, you can take away from a lot of different artists. You don't have to paint like these people or paint exactly, but just look at the color schemes of other abstract artists. And why do you respond to, let's say, oranges or blues or reds or whatever it is they're painting, or a composition of shapes? Well, if you break down a figure drawing or a figure painting, and there's a background to it and there's different things, it's an abstract thing if you really break it down. And it has to have balance, and it has to have certain speed of the color coming off the canvas or whatever it may be. So, that comes in from different artists' points of view.
So being open-minded is definitely crucial. In
life. I mean, without that in life, you kind of, what the hell's the point?
Right.
Right?
Now, you're going to have to allow me to blow you up a little bit here for our listeners and viewers. I'm going to have to read this off because your accolades are longer than my piece of paper, so I'm going to have to just choose a few of them. You were chosen to be the official commemorative artist for Major League Baseball's 2007, 2008, and 2009 All-Star Games, 2007 World Series, National Hockey League. You've been chosen to represent the world of sports in so many different ways, to be the face of that sport that they wanted to put out to the public and say, look at this. This is who we are. Did you approach them or did they approach you?
It was kind of a mix where I met a licensing guy because I was when the Red Sox won again, I was carrying around this painting at one of those signings where everybody gets together. And the paintings I do are pretty large, so it's not like it's a postage stamp size thing where it's in my pocket. You got to carry it around. And as you're carrying it around, somebody pulled me aside and said, "Hey, where'd you get that?" I said, "Well, I painted it." They said, "We want to talk to you." And this is, a very condensed version. Essentially, these guys hired me. They said, "Look, we got the rights to get you on the field for the All-Star game, and all the players will sign whatever you paint. Major League Baseball will give their seal of approval. The Players Association would do the same." And that's how it happened. And then in 2007 was the first time I did it, and it was very successful. And then Major League Baseball called us and said, "Look, the players really like Brian. They like what he paints. They want him back. We want him back." So for 3 years, they kept asking me to come back. So that's kind of how it started, with a licensee first approaching me, and then Major League Baseball approving it. But then after that, Major League Baseball had called.
Now, with all that, before all that happened, was there a time, that dark time in the artist, where he's really not sure if he's going to make it and starts to doubt themselves? Because it's human. We're going to doubt ourselves. And sometimes that doubt comes pretty heavy and pretty dark. Is there a time where you had to work through that and get back onto, hey, I can do this. I've got to ignore this thing that's trying to drag me down and fill me full of doubt?
Yeah, today. Today's been a day like that. So it doesn't end. It's one of those things where it's been so frustrating today, but that happened even more so back then, because you're trying to, at the time, you're really trying to network. You're trying to get your name out there. You're trying to get the quality of your work up, and you're not making any money. And you're trying to, I was Mr. Mom taking care of the kids while my wife was working. So it was like this tag team effort, and you're trying to get things going faster than they really are. And it took a good 8 years, maybe almost 10 years before we could honestly say, "Hey, look, I'm making enough money so my wife could maybe stay home with the kids." And even then, it was this roller coaster of who the hell knows when you're getting paid, who's going to pay for the insurance. I mean, like, it's hard. And there were many, many, many days like you just described. And there still are. There still are days where I'm just like, what the hell am I doing? Because I don't know. It talk about living by faith. It's kind of like, who knows? You know?
Right on. So you got to be able to accept that if you're going to do this kind of gig.
And then on the flip side, I get this imposter feeling. Like what do they call it? The imposter
Syndrome, yeah.
syndrome, right? Because I'm still waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder and go, hey, we found you out. Time to go back to work. Time to punch the clock. And so, like, you have this ping pong effect of like, oh, it's like, it's mad. And then if a painting doesn't come out right, I have a manager now, and I've had him for a while, and him and other people will be like, and I'll tweak and tweak and tweak a painting. It's like, right? And it doesn't make any business sense to keep working on this thing for 20, 30 more hours. Oh. And they're like, just finish the painting. I'm like, you're losing money. I'm like, but it's not right. So there's that other part. You just, So.
Speaking of paintings, you're quite prolific. You've put out a lot of work over many years.
I feel lazy.
Do you?
Lazy. Oh, yeah, because I have all these ideas in my head. And I'm so distracted all the time. I don't know, does this happen to you where you're like, oh, shiny objects. And I'm like, oh, look at that. Oh, let me paint this. Oh, I got another idea. And they don't pay shit, right? It's like, I just got a good idea as an artist. You're going, yeah, but that doesn't pay the bills. So you have to kind of go, well, this project is cool and it pays the bills. I got to do these before I do these. And you got to accept commissions. And so it's constant, this juggling effect or back and forth of trying to do that, where being prolific, back to your question, is like a necessity because I have to pay the rent and keep the heat on, put food on the table, and I got kids in college. And so you have to kind of become a business person and kind of, and I that's the other part where I've met a lot of good business people, and they're my collectors, and they ask me these questions. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm an art, like, They think business minded. They go, well, how many hours do you spend on a painting, and how many paintings do you make a year? And I'm like, what? So they've helped me to kind of mold me and go, hey, you need to rethink how you approach your projects if you want to keep providing for your family. So it's this hybrid. I can't totally be a business person, but being the artist person, I'm going to be back in the shed trading my drawings for food again. You know what I mean? So it's weird.
So you do make time for your paintings, some things that aren't going to sell, but there is some time for things that are just a passion to you, and you're like, I don't care if this oversells, I got to do this for me.
Yeah, and I keep kicking this chair. I apologize.
That's fine.
So that happened one time. It was probably 2014, and I go over to Steven Tyler's house one morning, and I'm at his house, and it's just me and him, and his girlfriend's there, and he's in this terry cloth robe. And he's Steven Tyler from Arrows. He's got his hairs up, but he's got all these rings on, and he's just a cool character. And as I'm driving home, I'm thinking, what would he look like if he was an animal, a lion, a tiger? And then I go, a werewolf. What would he look like if he was a werewolf? So I come up with this idea that I just do at night to play with, because I'm burnt out from doing all this other stuff. And I come up with essentially a rock and roll werewolf that, if you look at it, it's Steven Tyler or Keith Richards, all these guys that I've kind of, Guns N' Roses, all these guys I've kind of been in the circle with. And I just do it to play with. And I make 2 or 3 of them, and I put them up in the studio and have a show, and I just kind of put them off to the side. And my collectors come in, and they go, what the hell's with the werewolf? So I tell them the backstory. They're going, we want to buy them. I'm like... they're not really for sale. And then rent comes due and you go, hey, they're for sale. But then I've since painted probably over 30 of them, and they've been my biggest seller since, because people have, what I started off doing, what you mentioned, where we'll call it art for art's sake or for sanity, now has become probably one of my biggest sellers. A lot of the celebrities collect them, and Steven Tyler and Rob Gronkowski from the Patriots and Liv Tyler, and all these people now collect this painting, and they have them in their house. And I've had the Ramones call me up and say, hey, we were thinking of, or somebody who represented those guys and said, hey, can we use the werewolf for something, for the Ramones? I didn't do it, but it started out as what you just mentioned, having to do something because it's art for art's sake. So I think as an artist, you have to do those things. what's great is when people respond to them in a good way. And I have so many of those projects going on that don't pay and art for art's sake. But they're near and dear to me. So
Right on. It's great when it works out that way.
yeah. Doesn't always.
It
And I
doesn't
have a lot
always.
of duds. I have a lot of duds, a lot of pieces of shit. So, but
So, with all of this comes challenging. Let's talk about the craft itself.
sure.
How do you challenge yourself, or do the challenges just they just present themselves? Like, I guess I'm asking, is there a certain way you push yourself to maybe what someone would call a next level or an undiscovered part of you?
Yeah, I think that comes with one of the questions you asked before about, like, are you influenced or do you talk to other artists who are totally different? So when I see a different artist, I want to go, I want to try to incorporate something that's a totally different technique to mine, and now it becomes a hybrid technique. So it's something new, but it's influenced by something totally different. So instead of doing the same old thing, where I get bored with it anyway, and I start to hate what I'm doing, and then it becomes a production line, and I hate that. So you start to go, all right, well, let me try to approach it from this perspective. Or maybe it's, instead of using a brush, you're using like a piece of cardboard to scrape the paint. Or you're using, like I started painting on panels, and I'll take razor blades and scrape the stuff and really, mark it up. And it's like, there's some, fun things to play in there. So, but then, because you've wrecked the painting, you now have discovered maybe a new technique that's exciting as an artist.
Heck yeah. Is there a painting in you that's in your head right now that we haven't seen yet?
Oh, there's probably 50, and I'm not kidding. So it's like I have all these sketchbooks. I'm constantly like drawing, and I have like stacks of paper, and it's like the mad scientist in here. And it's people laughing, but at the same time, it's so torturous because I can't get to them. Right.
Yeah.
So you go, I got to cut the lawn. I got to paint my deck. And then you go, and all these ideas are floating around in here. You're going, there's too much noise in my head. So I try to get some things out, be productive, and I feel good. But there's so many different ideas that are in my head or on these canvases that I'll never show anybody because I want to develop them better before I show somebody. And there's probably, I would say I'm working on probably 25 other paintings that I haven't shown anybody.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. It's like, those aren't paying jobs. You know what I mean? So you have to kind of go, well, I got to reel myself in and, go paint something that's going to pay the bills.
So with all of this production that's constantly going on, it has to go on.
Yeah.
Downtime. What is it? Where do you fit it in? How do you recharge? How do you step back and refresh yourself?
That's a good question. I tried mostly I've been super blessed to be able to have is my downtime is, and I'm very simple. I still live in the same town I grew up in. I love it. And I like having my coffee on my front stairs talking to my neighbors. Like that's my
That's
downtime.
awesome.
Like my parents still live in the same neighborhood. My cousin, I'll sit outside. I sit with my wife. I'll watch Jeopardy at night. You know what I'm saying? It's like the years of me going to clubs and seeing bands. I'm like, I want to watch Jeopardy. You know what I mean? So it's kind of one of these things where I love spending time with my wife. My kids are starting to get into college, so it's. But I was always around my kids. I was always out playing. I was always out running around in the street and on skateboards or hitting the ball around or playing tag with them. And what's great about what I had as a job, or I have as a job, is I didn't miss anything. Time goes by so fast, and kids grow up so fast, and my kids did. I didn't miss it. So that was my downtime. Like I used to, years ago, I played, 5 different leagues of old man softball, slow pitch, right? And then there was 3 karate schools I went to at the same time. Like it was all these different things. I was go, 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 go. But those things have taken a different priority. I don't even do any of them anymore because my kids came in to my world, and I became an artist, and I essentially running my own business, and priorities had shifted. I don't regret shifting them, but that would be my downtime. That would be my recharging time. And again, it goes back to your first question. How did I go in to meet you? Where it was like, I just drawn to certain people where it's like, I want to spend time with people, like people I like, people who I get recharged from other people. Good fellowship, people call it that. I crave that. I think I crave that.
That's really awesome, and that's valuable to me as well. Everybody thinks I'm a party out on the town every night kind of guy, and then they realize I'm just a nerd with a good tailor. It kind of blows their mind. They're like, "What? He's sitting at home reading a book, petting his dog, you know."
Yeah.
I'm drinking real coffee instead of decaffeinated, so I'm cutting up tonight, Jack.
Yeah. That's my only vice. Is like I drink a coffee. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, I'll have a coffee. I'm such a bore. I remember going to certain parties like after these games, and I'm not going to see. Like I go to these players' houses, and they're like, hey, you want a beer? You want this? I'm like, I'll have a water. I gotta go home. They're like, you're leaving now? You just got here. I'm like, I gotta put my kids to bed. I'm like, I gotta go.
That's pretty funny. Everybody expects the artist to be the wild one in the group.
No, it's not. It's just kind of a cool thing. They know I like food. You know what I mean? Like, hey, Foxy's here. Let's feed him. You know?
You're okay with that?
Yeah.
If I could ask you, if I'm not wrong, you're a cancer survivor.
Yeah.
Now, it goes without saying that's going to affect one's life in many ways. Did it have any impact on your art, or was it just more of your life as a whole? Can you tell us about a little bit? Give us a little peek inside of that.
Oh, sure. It was thyroid cancer, and I had a lump in my throat for years. It was they call it a nodule, and they had kept an eye on it for. It was probably not long after I left my job and started. I noticed it, but slowly over time, it grew and grew and grew. And I kept avoiding it. They would go and stick needles in it and biopsy it. Oh, it's inconclusive. It's inconclusive. Finally, one time they were like, no, it's cancer. I'm like, shit. So you kind of, it takes a while. I remember getting a call and you kind of just going, all right, how am I going to tell my wife? Like, and then you have to go, all right, I don't really have good insurance either. So that now is a real thing where you kind of go, how the hell am I going to get a surgeon or somebody who's going to be able to be covered, who has, to take care of me? So there's these back and forth. So you kind of rectify it. And again, I have, I believe in God. I have faith. So I kind of go, all right, this has got to be part of the plan on some level. So not that you take comfort in it, but how I slept better at night was I kept telling myself, better me than my kids. Better me than my wife. Awesome. Better me than my kids. I was completely at peace with that mindset of saying it'd rather be me. You know what I mean? Like if you got kids or you got somebody you love more than yourself, you're like, you'd rather have it. It's easier to deal with it when it's you as opposed to your wife or your kids. So that helped me. And then I remember calling a friend of mine who played for the Patriots, and I said, look, and I told him what it was. I said, I don't have a doctor. He said, come on by the house. I'm going to make some phone calls and we'll get you a surgeon. And that is going to be covered. So one of the Patriots doctors made a phone call and I ended up getting a recommendation to a surgeon who it worked out. God's in control. So I kind of was able to be at peace about that. Now, if somebody else is dealing with the cancer, I have more, I'll lose sleep over it. Yeah. So, and again, I was lucky enough and fortunate enough that they took it all out and they said that we got good margins and it was a good, prognosis after that. They keep an eye on it. So I still have to go for checkups. I have to take medication every day now. So there's a minor hiccup in my life, but, I try to not even think about it anymore.
Right on, man.
Not in a bad way. I'm not trying to stick my head in the sand, but just like, I got no problem chatting with you about it.
Well, thanks for allowing us a little bit of that very, very personal insight. And jumping off that, I've seen a lot of your religious work. It's amazing. Your paintings are, I'm a big fan. Your religious work, did some of that come about after the cancer or was it before? Is it part of you practicing your religion or is it just illustrating figures that you resonate with? Can you tell us about the religious works you've done.
Yeah, I think yes to every part of that question. So I did a lot. Yeah, it's true. I think it's always what I've done. Always been influenced being a Christian. And I used to teach an adult Bible study. So I mean, and I wanted to. So there's a series, and I always like to try to make people think. Like we grew up. Or when I went to college, you go to art history. You take the art history class, and the art history class, you always see the classic, Jesus on the cross, and this and that, and he's bone white and whatever. But we've seen it over and over. Or if it's Moses, it's Charlton Heston, because we just grew up with it. Nothing wrong with it. It's just what we've grown. But so I'm going, well, as an artist, I don't want to take away somebody's vision of what's in their head of what one of these characters look like, or one of these people look like, or what Jesus or God looks like. I don't want to steal your vision from that. However, I want to kind of turn you on your head, maybe make you think a little differently. So there was a series I did called Murder Incorporated, and I wanted to teach that. And it was about 3 of the most effective men in the Bible were murderers. So Moses, right? King David, and Paul, who was originally Saul. Those guys were all considered murderers. And I was like, well, what would they look like? And what would they look like after? And then, so I just, I wanted to paint Moses when he was a young Egyptian, right? Darker skin. You know what I mean? But young. And maybe in an Egyptian garb and a shaved head. So he looked at, so to get people to go, what? Wait, I'm thinking of Charlton Heston.
You're like, that's not Charlie.
Yeah. So it was just to get people to go, wait, what? And then it was really to kind of get people to just ask questions, to go, or like King David and what he looked like, and Paul, and what his intensity would look like. You go, ooh, these guys are probably pretty intimidating looking at some. Really read up on them as if you take it nothing else but a history book and you look at it, you go, these guys were intense, man. So I wanted to paint it that way, and just kind of that. So that was that series. I have a whole series I wanted to do called Murderers, Whores, and Thieves. If you read the Bible, man, it's full of that stuff, and it's really like and if you look at it, you're going, because most people will go, well, God wants nothing to do with me, but these guys were murderers, and God used them to tremendous. Like, right? So you kind of go, nobody's outside of God's grace. And that was really what it was all about, just to get people to question and deal with their own thoughts and stuff like that. And then, but murderers, whores, and thieves. I mean, you think about Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. You think, and all these people that we in society, we go, they're the lowest. And you're going, yeah, but look what they did. Yeah. Look how God used them in a great way, right? So, and it would make us look at other people in society going, hey, don't spit on these people either. You know what I mean? So it was kind of, that's all it was really to do. And as an artist, and we see things, I'll do a scribble and I'm going, I know it's in my head. And I show people this stupid little scribble and I go, did you see it? And they're like, no. Like, all I see is a scribble. I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? But artists, that's why, again, I talk to you, you'd be like, yeah, I get it.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of getting it with paintings, do you, if I look at your work, it makes me wonder. I look at little pieces of this and that, and I think I'm looking at more than what I'm seeing, and I'm trying to dive in and figure it out. Do you employ that in your paintings intentionally? That it's a very common reaction. I would think that people would see your work and wonder what's going on here.
Sometimes I do. Some of them are very straightforward. But what ones do you mean?
The ones that get me is like the one behind you. When I see these big army ones, and I get that they're from some certain period in war, and these individuals have some kind of story, obviously. But I don't know what that story is, and I want to know what it is. It's like, talk to me. I see you. You're defending your country. You're obviously gone through some shit. Yeah. What? Tell me what it is. And I see that in your work, and I'm wondering, do you put that in there intentionally, or is it just part of this thing that comes out?
Well, I think it's both on that one, especially with the military stuff. So the military stuff, that one behind me, Vietnam veterans were building a permanent wall just like the one in Washington in the city that I have a studio in. And they wanted to commission me to do a painting that would raise money to help build this wall. And the wall is 280 feet. It's an amazing thing. So they had come to me. They knew I did some work with the Band of Brothers, World War II, to create help pay for a monument in Normandy, right? So they said, we want to kind of do something similar. I said, look, and this will answer your question. So I said, look, if you guys come in, you pick out who you want to come in, guys who are in country, Vietnam veterans who are in country, guys who fought over there. I said, I don't need to know what to paint. I just need to know why. So they said, okay, we'll bring some guys in. And some guys came in, and there was a lot to this. And this project was probably 3 or 4 years ago already, and it's changed everything for me in my head as far as a person. So they'd come in and they started talking to me. And one of the guys was a Marine, and he was 2 tours over there, and he was up on the DMZ, which was right in the shit, right? So they invited him. They're like, look, Harry's coming, and he's on our committee, and he's a very successful lawyer now, but he's never spoken about the war. But okay. I said,
wow.
These are your guys. So I don't, halfway through, Harry starts talking about his time over there. And you instantly see all the other guys just like,
yeah.
So something's heavy's going on. And that was the beginning of a rabbit hole I've never gotten out of yet, because you start to realize what these guys have lived through. And what I thought was going to be take a month to do a project, this painting took me 6 months because I've changed it so many times. I've watched documentaries and listened to these guys talk and read books, and my wife is like, "You're getting depressed." I got so depressed over the project, like it was I was miserable.
It sucked you in, huh?
It was miserable because here I am, because you want to do something for these men who for 50 years have been spit on.
Yep.
And then and I started to learn it. So I would paint these paintings, and I'll have to send you some of the videos where I would start working on these figures. I would change the faces, and I would start to put deeper meanings in them. I'm like, I got to make this count. This has got to be important. These guys are telling me so many personal things. And this thing is completely made up. It's not off a photo. It's not off this is not the guys who came in here. It was just made up. So at one point, I would paint the faces. And these guys would come in all different weeks. They would check on the progress of the paint, make sure I got all the details correct, the gun, the flak jacket, the helmet. But they wouldn't say anything. They would come in and look at it and go, yeah, it looks good. And to me, I'm watching their reaction. I'm going, they don't like it. Like, for whatever reason, I'm assuming they don't like it. So I would go home, or they would go home, and after they leave, I'd paint the faces out and send them and go, look, I painted the faces out. And I sent them a video of me over, covering. And one guy got back to me and goes, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't think you guys liked it. You guys didn't really respond to the way I thought you would. And one guy said to me, it's like, look, these guys cannot talk after they see this painting. You're unlocking things in their mind and their heads that they can't speak. They love the painting, but they cannot talk. And I'm like, oh. And I started to realize the importance of this work. And me, not so much me, but like to them.
Yes.
And you got to understand, we're old enough to understand what happened to these guys when they were spit on, when they came back. That's a black mark in history of how veterans were treated. It's never happened again, never happened before. So these guys have been living with this. So I want to get this right for them. So there's an importance for that. Finally do the painting. We unveil it. I've never seen grown men cry.
Wow.
Over a painting that I did. I'm like, and I could tell you story after story after story, some bizarre stuff that really happened during this whole process. But the real point is I said, look, you paid me for one painting, but that's not enough. I got to do more than one painting. I got to tell more of your story. I know nobody's paying for me. I got my family to pay for it, but I know in my heart, God's putting this on my heart to go, I got to paint more. So that's why all these other massive paintings that nobody's paying for, but I feel the need to do it because I need to tell this story. I said, I'll keep doing it if you guys come back and make sure I get it right. And then these guys would make their way in, and I have a private studio. I don't let anybody in. They would knock on the door. I would always put my brushes down and let them in. If they want to have a coffee, then we would sit and talk. If they didn't want to talk, but they could come in, have a coffee. And even one of the guys I would let paint with me on these paintings. And he doesn't know how to paint, but it was, his wife said, so therapeutic. I mean, how do you not who gives a shit if somebody's painting on your painting if it's going to help somebody in their life? So this project has taken on like this, and it's still going. That's a project I'm working on for 4 years. And I'm not a veteran. I play with paint for a living. So that these guys trust me to tell their story and maybe educate somebody else down the road about war and how people are treated and how people come back and how they're changed forever and maybe fucked up forever. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I got so depressed, like I was telling you before. I did another painting, and we unveiled their painting, but I did another painting, and it's called The Weight of Memory. And it's just of this soldier with a washed out face and just very abstract, or not. It's kind of this hybrid abstract. And I needed to purge what they were telling me out of my head because I was so depressed over it.
Wow.
And it's this painting. And then the vets would come in later and go, that's me.
Check that out.
That's me. So I was like, what I just felt I needed to purge and throw up out of my system just to get so I could sleep at night. They responded to, they were like, can I have a copy of that? I'm like, yeah. So, and one guy's wife was like, I now understand my husband after looking at that painting. So it's like, whoa. So
that's heavy.
It's very heavy. And you go, I'm a guy who plays with paint for a living, and you want to get it right for these people because I just, at the end of the day, I want my life to count for something. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not a EMT. I'm not saving lives. I'm not, you know what I'm saying? It's hard. Like I said, I got the imposter syndrome. It's like, I feel like I'm getting away with something, you know? So I want to, that this stuff counts for somebody. It's like, that is very meaningful as an artist.
Wow. Well, that body of work, I'm sure, will go down in history as some of the most needed art for those people in our time. And with that, we're going to wrap up with, let's say it's 200 years from now. You and I are dead and gone. And there's a college kid. He's flipping through all of his art history books. And Brian is now history, and his work comes up. And this student studies your work. What do you want them to take away from? What's the lesson that they've learned from Brian Fox 200 years from now, and they're studying it, and they're like, yeah, my favorite Renaissance painter was Brian Fox, and this is why.
Yeah, I think it's a great question.
What do you want to leave with them?
It's a couple things. If I can do it, you could do it.
That's a good one.
If you know what I mean, the ability that I'm given is a rented talent. It means it's going to go to somebody else when I die. So, and you're not given those talents and abilities by mistake. So if I could do it, you could do it.
Awesome.
You know what I mean? And if you were just talking art, I'm hoping that somebody will come away, and if somebody gets some sort of healing from it or something like that, it's like, what's the Picasso quote? The purpose of life is to find your gift, or the meaning of life is to give it away. Giving it away is like, that would be what I would be like. Look, you got to find a way to give it away. You know what I mean? Find your gift, but give it away.
Awesome.
And I'm not talking like, I'm just talking somehow connect with people. I mean, we don't live in a vacuum, especially today where everybody's always at each other's throats for something. It's like, no, man, you gotta find a way to give it away.
Well, Brian, thank you for those words of wisdom. Thanks for giving us some of your time and letting us get inside your art head today. And folks, if you got a kick out of this episode, be sure to check out more. And before we leave, Brian, can you tell us where our listeners and viewers can find your work and check it out?
Yeah, the best probably, I mean, I have a website, which is brianfoxstudios.com, but I'm also on Instagram, which is you get the latest stuff, which is @artist Brian Fox. That's about it.
All right, everybody, make sure you check him out. And thanks for tuning in. And until
Thanks,
next time, be well.